So let's chat about a few things that are going on. Today, our Education and GO Committee will be meeting as a follow-up on our OLO report, hearing from the school system as to their thoughts with respect to that report. And that report, I think, fundamentally just underscored what our county had been saying all along with respect to the maintenance of effort law in particular, which is that it's going to actually act as a disincentive to be as generous to education as we've been in the past, and that that's not a good thing. There are, of course, waivers in the law, and there have been those in the education community that have taken umbrage with the OLO report because it didn't stress the waivers that are in the law. But as OLO observed during its presentation to our council, all of those waivers are outside the control of the county, and therefore the county cannot rely upon those waiver processes in establishing its budget. So I am sure we will hear a lot this afternoon on this set of issues, but I thought the OLO report was an important report and one in which hopefully we'll begin laying the groundwork for potential reforms going forward, because we will need reforms going forward if we are to be in a position where it is easy for us to exceed maintenance of effort, which of course our county has done many, many times in the past, but now is in a position where it is so much harder for us to be as generous to education as we might otherwise want to be. So that's the OLO report. On Thursday, the Transportation, Infrastructure, Energy, and Environment Committee will be having an important meeting with national figures from around the country on Utility 2.0 perfect power for Montgomery County. We are bringing in, again, national experts, including the executive director of the Energy Future Coalition, the proponents of perfect power, who are coming in from Chicago and California, as well as a former state regulator, chairman of the Colorado State Commission. Our goal with respect to this meeting, again, is to position Montgomery County as serving as the pilot that was identified by the governor in his recommendations on reliability. And recommendation number 11, I believe, was to have a pilot that would serve as a national model for what the energy utility of the future would look like. And my goal, of course, is to make sure that happens in Montgomery County and that we do that, because for all reasons that the people of Montgomery County understand, it is most urgent here in Montgomery County that we serve in that capacity. So there will be discussion on Thursday as to what that looks like and the process of going from where we are today to getting a pilot crafted that would then be subject to the Maryland Public Service Commission's approval. I have invited PEPCO to attend this briefing and would say that it is absolutely essential that PEPCO be a willing collaborator in this process, because it's just so difficult to have a pilot of this nature if they are in resistance to it. So my hope is, particularly with the work of the Energy Future Coalition, that we can create a context in which we are able to establish a national pilot for the energy utility of the future that would provide greater reliability, greener power, and more control in individual consumers' hands than what we have today, decentralized power. And this is a model that is not consistent with the utility model today. And so it's going to be a challenge. Where this has been done before, and it's been done in a number of communities, and you will hear about that on Thursday, it is with public power. It is where the ability to bring about these kinds of reforms are easier because it is a public power entity and their financial interests are considerably different. Here we have an investor-owned utility that has its own economic interests that are important, and therefore and a business model that it is, like all investor-owned utilities have adopted for many years. And so we're asking, we need to change this. We need to experiment. It's going to be a challenge for our utility. It is going to be a challenge for our regulators. Let me make clear, the technological challenges are not that great. We have a pretty good sense of the kinds of things that can be done, and you will hear a lot about that on Thursday. It is the regulatory institutional arrangements that are so difficult to come to terms with. And so that work between now and March, it is my hope that Montgomery County, working with the Energy Future Coalition, will be able to create a pilot, working with PEPCO, working with stakeholders, that we would then present to the Maryland Public Service Commission with the governor's blessing as to how Montgomery County could serve as this national model. So I think it's important work, and I'm pleased that we're moving forward, and Thursday will be sort of the opening act, if you will. It by no means is the definitive show. It is to begin the conversation that between now and March we need to have, and will be an intensive process, because you're going to need a lot of economic analysis, you're going to need a lot of regulatory analysis, because you need to make sure, how is this going to get paid for, what's going to be the impact on ratepayers, what's going to be the impact on PEPCO, what are the technologies that we want to employ. All of those things we need to work through between now, hopefully, and the end of March, when the governor has asked for this pilot to be presented to him. So those are two issues. Why don't I turn it over to you guys to see what the other things that are on your minds? And
when you say decentralized power, you mean microgrids?
Microgrids is an example of decentralized power, yes.
What other examples?
Well, you have combined heat and power, where you have cogeneration, where is also decentralized, where if you have a large facility, you are generating enough power that you are actually able to serve yourself as well as you serve your own needs and serve broader needs. So it is, there are various approaches, but certainly microgrids is what I am most interested in at this juncture in seeing as the model for decentralized power. And microgrids essentially use renewable power like solar with battery backup so that you are insulated from the grid and have higher reliability. And this is one of the things that we want to demonstrate. Again, recognize that there are microgrids in Montgomery County today. FDA is a microgrid and has shown itself to be insulated from the utility system and has never lost power. So this is our goal, is to have a much more reliable system so that what today has turned into an economic disadvantage for our county, we could flip it and become a model for the nation in having highly reliable power, and therefore be able to attract industries that seek highly reliable power.
You mentioned regulation as being the main hurdle here. What about the not immaterial fiscal cost to take over PEPCO system?
Well, no, again, this is not, you need to be real careful here. This is not taking over PEPCO system. This is not public power, okay? This is working with PEPCO to create a pilot in which their economic interests would have to be addressed. But this is not buying their system. This is modeling and piloting a very different kind of utility system that, because of its experimental nature, would have to be treated in an experimental nature way. But it is not taking over PEPCO. In fact, what I tried to stress is we need PEPCO's collaboration, because they could, if they are in resistance, this is going to be a problem. which is why I've gone out of my way to invite them, and why they attended the very first meeting of the Energy Future Coalition, which was explicitly called several months ago for the purpose of exploring a pilot in Maryland. So PEPCO has been involved in this conversation from the beginning, and they're going to need to be at the table as we sort through both the technological ways that we want to proceed as well as the institutional and regulatory.
Is there a specific region of the county? Because we've talked about the fact that microgrids can't be all-encompassing.
Right.
Is there a
It is
specific
not.
region you're looking at?
No, it would be presumptuous of me to pick a region at this stage. I think it is fair to say that we're not talking about the county as a whole. I mean, you're going to pilot something, and then you pilot in, if you will, a neighborhood, a community, and you make sure that the scale is large enough to be meaningful, but not too big that it becomes impossible. So the Goldilocks principle is what we will be seeking.
The way you're speaking, you've invited PEPCO, have they not responded? Or
Oh, no,
they're-
PEPCO will be there.
They will be there.
PEPCO will be there. And then there will be, of course, follow-up conversations. This, again, is the beginning of the public conversation that had started previously, that was embraced by the governor, and now needs to take form. And so my effort is to help bring this into form.
You mentioned public power both in your answer to her and in kind of the discussion of how these work better in public power situations. Are you still pursuing public power? Is that still an idea that's being looked at?
My understanding is that the members of the state legislature are interested in pursuing that possibility. I continue to believe it is something that we should be in a position to pursue if, in fact, we conclude that it's in our interest to do so. So I will certainly be working with members of the state legislature should they decide to proceed down this path. So I have not lost my own personal interest with respect to it. I have always recognized that it is an uphill battle, and therefore I don't want to put all my eggs in that basket. So I'm proceeding along parallel tracks, if you will. I want to see the PEPCO system improved. I want to see a different utility model adopted. And if we can do that through an investor-owned utility, if PEPCO's willing to help bring about this kind of change, then I think that would be a very good outcome. At the same time, I think public power has a lot of advantages and ought to continue to be on the table.
Have you heard back from the county attorney with regard to your?
Have not.
Did you answer, what of the potential costs in this sort of approach?
We don't know those numbers. That's part of the economic analysis that has to be done. It also depends on how big you scale this up. So you're going to have competing cost figures, and you just have to figure out.
Forgive
But
me for the ignorance of this question. You mentioned March. What's the significance of March?
that's when the governor had asked for the pilot to be presented, and it just seems like that's the time frame that we want to gear ourselves to.
It's not a self-imposed.
It was the governor had asked for it, and so we're going to be working with the governor's people. We're having informal conversations with the commission. You know, we want everybody to be aware this is our desire for Montgomery County to serve as this pilot, and so we're going to proceed down that path. Yes?
Have you heard back on the bag tax?
No, and won't hear again, apologize. My request on the bag tax was that we would hear after it had been in place for a full year. So there won't be anything new on that probably until spring of next year. After it's been in for a year, they've analyzed the data, and then they'll come back, I would assume, in early spring and say, here's what we know, and things of that nature.
Early voting starts at the end of the week. Are you planning to vote early?
I haven't decided. I probably will vote early just so that I'm free on Election Day to do a campaign for the candidates of my choice.
Did you vote early in the last election?
I did. And I would urge all people to vote early so that there's no question about their ability to get to the poll. And vote early, vote often, is that the expression?
I have a question on Emily for a second. There was some talk after the presentation in the report about this forcing us to be more conservative, or some council members even mentioned future changes to MOE. Is anyone, to your knowledge, are you pursuing any changes within the next section?
Well, recognize that we had given amendments to all the stakeholders last time, and I tried to give voice to some of those amendments before. The amendments that were most important to us were amendments that would have given an automatic waiver for counties like Montgomery County who have been generous to education and who are in verifiably bad economic times. So verifiably good counties in verifiably bad economic times would have an automatic off-ramp. That takes it out of anybody's discretion. Okay? And that's the goal of defining it such that people were comfortable. So let's say for purpose of this conversation, Montgomery County had exceeded maintenance of effort by $50 million. I'm sorry, thank you. If we've exceeded maintenance of effort by $50 million and we're in a bad recession, I think we ought to be able to take that into account in a waiver process. So if you don't give us some credit for being more generous to education and we're in a bad economic slump, that's a problem. So that's why for us as a county that had been so generous, I perceive that this is actually a step backwards, the strengthening of the maintenance of effort law. Because we almost always meet maintenance of effort. It was only in the most severe economic circumstances in which we weren't able to do so. And quite frankly, in those kinds of circumstances going forward, we're going to need to be able to do so. But allow us to be more generous in good times as long as we're covered on the bad times. But now what the OLO report basically is articulating is you have to be able to judge years in the future what the economy is going to look like, because you can't presume you'll be able to get off. So that we had made those amendments. I had personally drafted those amendments and drafted amendments that would take it out of the State Board of Education, because right now they're the people that act on the waiver. Well, it's sort of the chicken in the hen house, or the fox in the hen house kind of argument. I was like, really, these are the people that I'm going to put the county's fiscal situation before? That's not their job. Their job is to look after education. Are they the kind of unbiased tribunal that you would want to make that? If you were a county, would you be comfortable going to a tribunal whose job it is to support education? And I don't begrudge that role, but I don't believe that that's a tribunal in which our county's fiscal situation ought to be placed before.
And those amendments, though, didn't go anywhere last session, so is there any impetus to try and get them this session? Is it too soon?
It may be too soon, but in my judgment, it is going to be the conversation that we will have to have at some point in the future. And it may be when the Board of Education comes forward with a budget that exceeds maintenance of effort, and our council and the county executive look at it and say, I'm sorry, what part didn't you understand when we were telling you this is not going to work for us? So it may be that we're going to have to say no before we create an environment in which the politics change. We had some modest little parking issues around my district. I am hopeful that those parking issues are going to be resolved in a favorable way. The community that was going to be affected with respect to this is asked for residential parking permits, and I've conveyed that to our Department of Transportation, and I was pleased that our Department of Transportation immediately indicated that it would have put a pause button on moving further with parking meters until they resolve the applicability of parking permits, and that's a community process that has to be embraced by the community for parking permits, and so that's underway now, in which they're informing the community with respect to it. And clearly the meter situation was not handled particularly well. It wasn't handled particularly well in terms of notification. And I'm not clean with respect to this. Our council approved this. Our committee approved this. This is on me too. The Department of Transportation suggested it, our staff recommended it, and we approved it. So I'm not blameless in this, and that's why I moved aggressively to say, we may have made a mistake on this one. So let's hit the reset button on this one and go back and get it right. I think we are. We have a little dust up on tech mods. The county executive has sent over a letter with respect to the school system's desire to have more funding for Promethean boards. And the county executive has sent over a letter in which he has cautioned against spending more money on Promethean boards because the British company is experiencing significant financial distress, and he's concerned about that. And I spoke with the superintendent over the weekend, and I expect the superintendent to respond to the county executive's concerns. That's something that will be going to committee on November 5th. And there'll be a public hearing on it before that because we actually have our appropriation that we have to make with respect to it, and I believe there's a public hearing even before the 5th.
You agree with the county executive, just caution?
I'm not in a position to have an independent view. I want to wait and see what the superintendent says with respect to it. I am advised that the company has no debt, so while it is not meeting the financial projections, I'm not aware that it is in debt and therefore is in danger of going bankrupt. I think we have Promethean boards in over half of our schools at the moment, and therefore there is the question of if we don't go forward with this, what would we do? And I know that they have looked at others. In fact, we had been approached by representatives of Apple who had asked for the opportunity to bid with respect to this. I'm told that the school system has looked at Apple and concluded that this doesn't work for them and doesn't work for the school system, but we will hear from the school system itself with respect to that because I'm sure all these issues will be raised.
I know the planning board is looking at a supplemental appropriation request with regard to 10 Mile Creek, and
I believe it is being introduced tomorrow.
yes, it's about a quarter of what was projected four years ago, I believe, or 2009, when they projected about $1 million to do an amendment for this. This is only about $250,000, correct?
Yes.
So is this something that you look for the council to support?
Yes, it is something that was part and parcel of our unanimous support for having a master plan process. And we didn't really speak to that in our previous conversations, but I was quite proud of our council for how it handled the Clarksburg situation. It could have gone in any of a number of directions, and it has been a hugely divisive issue in the past. 5-4 votes were the order of the day when it came to anything and everything related to Clarksburg, when it came to these development sets of issues and how you proceed. So that we were able to have a unanimous council that lined up behind a park and planning process, that master plan process that by definition includes the possibility of changing zoning, of changing density. That's a big deal. And what they need the $250,000 for is to primarily, I think, hire consultants to do the kind of work that really is beyond their capacity and should be beyond their capacity, because we're talking about things, hydrology, as to these are really scientific, very detailed sets of issues that I wouldn't expect our park and planning people to do. So we have a limited scope. It is scientific work that needs to be done, and then from your scientific work, then you step back and do the policy work as to how do you reconcile your policy approach with the science that you have now discovered. So this was the deal, if you will, that we would provide them the resources they need to get this done in the time frame we need it done by. So for them to get this work done in a year, which is very important to get it done in a year, they needed help, and we were pleased to oblige them.
And you feel it's a reasonable figure?
I cannot second guess their figure. They have said that this is what it takes. I assume, yes. I trust that they know what they need and what it costs to get it. What else, gang? Well, have we done it? Thank you.